The Lima Bean Monster. Dun dun dun. By Dan Yacarino, illustrated by Adam McCulley. Sammy hated lima beans. Sammy hated them so much that Sammy hadn't eaten a single lima bean in their entire life. Sammy's parents tried a million different ways to make them. They tried lima bean soup. They tried lima bean casserole and lima bean surprise, whatever that was. One night, Sammy's parents gave no attempt to hide them at all. Just plain old lima beans. That was the worst. Sammy stared down at them sitting there on the plate, and they stared right back. "Oh, for heaven's sake," said Sammy's parents. "Just eat them. They're good for you." Each night, Sammy tried a new way to get rid of those crummy lima beans. Sammy hid them underneath the mashed potatoes or stuffed them into the napkin. Once Sammy tried feeding them to the dog, but the dog didn't like lima beans either. Then Sammy had a brilliant idea. While Sammy's parents were not looking, Sammy pretended to eat the lima beans while quickly stuffing them into the socks. That was just swell," said Sammy. "Gee whiz, those beans must be real good for me. I feel like going outside to play." Before being excused from the table, a skeptical parent checked all the usual places for Sammy's unwanted lima beans. But they were nowhere to be found. Sammy ran out the back door and down the street with a sock full of hot, squishy, stinky lima beans. When Sammy got to the vacant lot at the end of the block, Sammy dug a hole, tossed the beans in, and covered them with dirt. Snickered Sammy. "I'll never have to eat another lima bean as long as I live." Well, you'll never guess what Sammy's parents made the next night. That's right, more lima beans. "Since you enjoyed them so much last night, we decided to make them again," said Sammy's parents happily. "Let my parents pile on as many lima beans as they want." Sammy had a surefire way of getting rid of them. This time, as Sammy threw the beans into the hole in the vacant lot, Sammy's friend Chester walked by. "What you doing, Sammy?" asked Chester. Sammy explained the brilliant method of disposing of unwanted vegetables. Chester agreed. It was a brilliant method. The next night, Chester was tossing their lima beans into the hole right along with Sammy's. Looks like they're tossing in some carrots and broccoli as well. News traveled fast, and soon all the kids in the neighborhood were throwing their Brussels sprouts, parsnips, lima beans down into the hole. Before long, they started bringing other things they didn't like. Ugly birthday sweaters, failed spelling tests, tap shoes, even an accordion. Sammy had to draw the line when Chester tried to throw in the baby brother. Even though you don't like your baby brother, you can't throw him in a hole. One night, there was a huge storm. Snug and warm inside their bed, Sammy listened to the thunder grumble and watched the lightning streak across the sky. It struck everything it could find: tall trees, telephone poles, even the church steeple. By this time, that little mound of dirt in the vacant lot had grown big and tall. The lightning decided to strike that too. Not once, but twice. All through the night, the mound glowed and glowed and grew until all of a sudden the ground burst open and out crawled a huge, ugly, scary creature. It was as tall as a tree, and it stank of lima beans and sweaty socks. Yuck. It was the Lima Bean Monster. Dun dun dun. I see the sweater, the accordion. Oh, there's broccoli for the nose, the failed spelling test, the old tap shoes. Disgusting. The monster stomped through the neighborhood, tossing around cars and stepping on houses. People screamed and ran in all directions to get away from the horrible, stinky, smelly Lima Bean Monster. Dun dun dun. Roar! The monster roared as it almost stepped on Chester. Me want human beings. Me want human beings. Help! Cried Chester. Somebody save us. At that moment, Sammy was too busy holding their nose and running in the other direction to hear Chester. The rampaging monster spotted Sammy and scooped Sammy up in his massive paw. The smelly breath of the monster almost made Sammy faint. Me eat some human beings, bellowed the monster. Wait, cried Sammy. Don't eat me. I'm too small. Wouldn't you like to eat someone bigger? After examining this thoroughly, the Lima Bean monster agreed. And the ever so helpful Sammy pointed out the science teacher making a fast getaway down the street. Now that's a meal, said Sammy. The monster dropped Sammy, roared down Elm Street, and scooped up Sammy's science teacher. Eat lots of big human beans, the monster growled, and proceeded to grab every single grown-up in the neighborhood. Help, they pleaded. We're doomed, hollered Chester's dad. What a way to go, wailed the science teacher. Do something, Sammy, do something. Chester, I've got an idea, Sammy exclaimed. First, we've got to round up every kid we know in the neighborhood. Sammy and Chester got all the kids together, and they quickly formed a circle around the Lima Bean Monster. Dun dun dun. The monster looked down at them and laughed. Me come back when you little sprouts are bigger. Ha ha ha. The monster opened wide and prepared to drop Chester's dad into the monster's gaping gullet, just as Sammy cried out, Okay, everybody, there's only one way out of this mess. Eat your vegetables. The monster howled as hundreds of tiny little teeth nibbled on the monster's feet, chomped on the monster's kneecaps, chewed on the monster's arms until there was nothing left except for half of an ugly birthday sweater. When it was all over, everybody cried, Hooray for Sammy! Hooray for Sammy! They carried Sammy up and down the street on their shoulders. That night, as Sammy's parents tucked Sammy into bed, Sammy asked, You know what? What's that, dear? Sammy thought for a moment and said, Lima beans aren't so bad after all. Really? Said Sammy's parents. How do you feel about turnips? Don't push your luck, parents. The end.